Thanks for listening today. This is the KJL podcast. We are doing a brief podcast on kind of lobbying 101 for citizens lobbying. If you're part of an organization, an association who's going to do your lobby day, to help you kind of be equipped and be prepared for that day. So Jazz here and I are going to have a little conversation. He's going to ask me some questions, and then hopefully that helps you build upon some of the skills you have or develop them as you get more engaged to advocate on behalf of your organization or your community. So Jazz?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be on the team and looking forward to learning a lot. So I guess my first question for you would be that when you're going into a lobbying meeting, whether it's in person or over the past year over Zoom or Skype or however the meetings are being conducted, what is the goal of a lobbying meeting?
My goal always is to get a second meeting. I mean, you're never going to solve what you're there to talk about in one 30-minute interaction with the state legislator. So the goal I always set out is to establish a rapport and be validated as someone who has the relevant knowledge and information to that member. And sometimes that's relevancy politically to the person because you're a constituent and you live there, or your organization's based in their district, so it's important to them, or relevancy because you have a certain expertise or experience that can help inform them on it. But I always, when you start to process that meeting is, so first intro, why you're there and who you are. We'll get into a little bit more of this, but what's the problem? And then you really should be hoping to bring the solution to that. But within that framework, you should be talking about why you have relevancy to that problem and to that solution. So as they dig into the issue that you've raised with them, you are then seen as someone they should call back and engage further and help develop the policy. So generally the goal of the first meeting, which is kind of what we're talking about here, is to get the second meeting or the second interaction or be an invited voice into that policymaking decision that you're there to talk about.
Yeah, and so at that second meeting, or as you're brought in further and as that relationship develops, at the end of the day, people want to see an impact. They want to see some progress made on their issue. So how can citizens and community organizations have an impact through this work?
So I think, citizens groups and organizations, one great impact that they have that if it's at their disposal is to engage the legislature or a legislator in their office on a normal lobby meeting or back home for a meeting, but getting them at your location, if you are a nonprofit servicing someone, or if you are, a public safety officer who wants, inviting them down to the station and seeing what's going on, or if you are an environmental advocate, ask them to come to your, show them something in their own community that you think highlights the need. Putting something a little more tangible with the policy you're talking about is a great way to have an impact. And I also think community organizations, depending on the size of the organization and what their geographic relationship is, the more you can connect citizens and constituents to their member that care about the issue, you're really going to push the issue up in the member's office. So as an organization and a citizen lobbyist, that's something we always try and pair as best we can, voters from a district with a member to talk to them about an issue that they're passionate about that affects their own district. Because in the end, that's these members, they represent, the 80,000 or 90,000 people in a House district, or 200,000, 300,000 folks in a Senate district, to that their community. So trying to bring that back and connect them to that is really, I think, helpful for those community organizations and citizen lobbyists.
Yeah, and when those citizen lobbyists, community organizers, and people that want to make a difference, when they're going into their first meeting or maybe even their second meeting and one's going forward, what information should they have prepared for going into those meetings?
Yeah, I mean, this builds off that, the goal of the first is to get a second meeting, right? So it can be a letter or a one-pager, depending on the sophistication of the organization and what you're working on. If you have the ability to kind of put together a one-pager, a little about who the organization is, and then what the problem and what the solution is. I mean, that's ideal if you're don't necessarily have that capacity. A simple letter that doesn't have to be fancy, just something there, and then your contact information along with that, so they have something to connect to. And then it's always great to ask them what the best email to send that is to, so then you can also make a kind of a digital connection with that member as well. But that document, what that is, that leave behind, we want it to, clearly state who you are, why you're relevant to the conversation, all in kind of that first, who you are, and then what the problem is that you're working on and what the solution you think is to that problem should be kind of encapsulated in that, initial document, with the goal of leading, here's what we have, and then, you work through that document as a little bit of a guide through the meeting oftentimes. And then at the end, it's, so we're finished up here. We gave you a feeling of how we think about this. When would be a good time for you, or, you guys to take a look at this, think this through, see what's going on in the legislature, and then we can follow up and find time to have another conversation to see if there's more we can do to help you find a solution to this, and try and build that into the conversation as a natural conclusion is always really helpful.
So you've taken us through your thought process of going into the first meeting, maybe the second meeting, and working in partnership with these organizations and legislators going forward. What is your approach or philosophy more broadly towards legislative engagement?
So I try and inform that by my time having sat on the other side and through, was probably now hundreds of meetings with citizens organizations and lobbyists and other folks who are trying to effectuate different changes within federal or state government. And what I always really appreciated was when someone took the time to understand my boss's politics of the issue, whether it's politics of their caucus, politics of their constituents back home, and just showing an appreciation that what we may be asking you isn't exactly easy. That means you've shown a willingness to care and are a little bit thoughtful about, the position you may be putting them in to sometimes make what is sometimes a hard decision. And then if you can highlight how you might be willing to help alleviate some of those politics if there are. So we know in your district you have a lot of folks who support, position X, and we're here about position Y. And we just want to let you know there's a lot of folks who share our position back in the community, and you can talk about what that number is or what the organizations that support it are. And then say that if we do work together and we're able to find a policy solution, do know that we are ready to help engage the community and explain how this policy change is really going to help us. And we want to work with you, and, organizations on, that are taking position X to try and find a way to get this done. And just that simple recognition gives, I think, you some validity that you're there to work earnestly and be a serious actor. So I always appreciated that. And it's just a little bit of time to spend to understand what the members' politics around an issue are, if you can. I mean, it's not always something you can, and a lot of issues don't have, intense politics around them, but, recognizing that, like I said, none of these decisions are easy because it's not made in a vacuum, that it goes a long way.
Yeah, so you've worked on a lot of these issues for a lot of years, and you've seen them from a lot of different perspectives, and you've been really on both sides of a lot of these interactions. And so from your experience, from what you've been through, can you share some do's and don'ts for people going into these sorts of meetings and wanting to do this kind of work?
For sure. So I think we've touched on some of them throughout it, but just to recap a little bit is, have or try to have an ask of a timeline for follow-up. You've shared this information, I've shared with where we're at. How long do you think it'll take you guys to research it internally, and when can we follow back up to get a sense of where you guys might land on this? Or if you guys have more information or if you guys need more information, then we can also help partner to find that, and try and get, some sort of commitment around that piece of it. Leave good, reliable contact information for this. I guess this is two parts. Determine who's going to be the point of contact with that office, and then leave good, reliable contact information, and work hard to get good, reliable contact information from the staff and the member if you can. And then this is, important, and I'm, everyone is busy. So sometimes, you may not think this through if you're running from meeting to meeting, but generally speaking, the person who sits at the front desk of that office often schedules and is somewhat of a gatekeeper for the member, in spending the time to let them know you're thanks for the help scheduling it. You appreciate them making the time for you. Makes getting that second meeting helpful. So, just, long story short, engage the staff and be appreciative, because, these are the folks who really kind of make the machine run. So don't, I've touched on a little bit in the last piece, is don't assume the decision that you're asking this person to make is easy, or this kind of rolls in the second piece, that they've ever thought about it before. If you're on a certain committee and, you may not have spent a lot of time on something that's outside of that committee, and this could be the first time, or at least, one of the first times you spend some time digging into an issue, maybe not the first time you've heard of it. So it's not uncommon for a member not to have a really developed, idea around a policy yet. And on that point, don't assume that anyone knows as much as you do. So, at times pausing to break to say, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about things you already know. Have you, know about this issue, or getting a level set at the beginning to kind of encapsulate where they're at, and then speaking to them where they're coming from, rather than, speaking in a way that you could end up talking past them. Members do dozens of these meetings a week. And it's easy to just kind of blur past one and move on to the next one if the person in front of you is not taking the time to connect with you in a meaningful way. So I think that's kind of builds on having some the empathy or understanding where the other person's coming from, is that working through your dialogue with them in a way that makes sure you're bringing them along at a pace at which they can absorb and are engaging. If you're talking too far past them and they're not asking questions, that's not good. Or if you're speaking at a too elementary of a level and they're not asking questions because they already know it all, that's not good. You kind of want to find that spot where they're reaching and trying to learn more and being engaging. So those are some things that I think can help foster a really good meeting.
Great. Well, that is it from the questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I would just say that, folks, it can be an intimidating environment. These members have tons of these meetings. They, most of them love to hear from people, or people get into politics because they're generally engaging and dynamic and want to meet folks. So be prepared, be as professional as you can. But if you have a meeting, the very high likelihood is that they're going to give you a good chunk of time to explain why you're there and be respectful. So take advantage of that, be comfortable as you can, and talk to them about why you're there and some of the things we've already touched on. But it's easy to be intimidated, and it's easy for me to say not to be intimidated because I've been doing this a long time. But like I said, I rarely hear about a citizens meeting or a kind of a community meeting engagement with the legislature where things really go sideways. So be happy to be there, and they'll be happy to hear from you. And they may not fall in love with your issue, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad or awkward interaction. Anytime we can or answer questions here at KJL, kjlteam.com. You can find us there, and we're happy to engage and help folks along through this journey as they're working on it. So feel free to reach out to us there. My email is andy@kjlteam.com, and always happy to hear from folks who are working on this. So thanks for the questions, Jazz. Thanks, folks, for listening, and we'll see you in the Capitol whenever we're able to get back in there.
Thank you for joining A Key to the Inside, the KJL podcast.